It's not a stand-up fight, just another bug hunt. It's NES Works episode 148.
Body language. Ha!
Yes, Tengen brings us another NES game that previously appeared on Master System. And, not unlike Afterburner, you could make a case that the NES version turned out better than the Master System game. Oh, make no mistake, this rendition of Alien Syndrome looks like absolute ass compared to the Master System release. The sprites look terrible, the backgrounds lack detail, and the developers made color palette choices like they hate your eyes personally. And don't forget the wretched audio, too. And yet Alien Syndrome on NES does something very important that the Master System release did not. It lets a second human being join in for this alien blasting excursion. In arcades, Alien Syndrome was one of Sega's attempts to land a hit along the lines of Gauntlet, which is to say a game built around cooperative multiplayer that would absolutely guzzle coins at a prodigious rate with unfair, overwhelming, yet somehow addictively compelling gameplay. Sega's Quartet put 4 players into a sort of side-view shooter, and it was fine, but it didn't quite capture the roaming maze of infinite monsters vibe of Gauntlet. Alien Syndrome, on the other hand, pretty much nailed it, despite only providing console positions for 2 people. The top-down perspective allowed the action to roam in all directions as players battled endless waves of aliens in a maze-like environment, collecting alternate weapons and struggling to avoid instant kills while seeking out their captive crewmates to rescue before time ran out. Thematically, Alien Syndrome shares a lot in common with Xenophobe from Midway. Groups of players making their way through exploding space stations while trying not to take it on the chin from bio-horror creatures that definitely were not inspired by the success of 1986's Aliens, nope. But Alien Syndrome feels more hectic than Xenophobe, thanks to the way enemies can approach from all directions, and the fact that a single misstep takes you out of the action. And the Master System version more or less captured this with pretty decent visuals and music, but it certainly lost something in abandoning the multiplayer component of the arcade machine. The NES game, despite looking, as they said back in 1989, way grody by comparison, is ultimately the more entertaining version. Adding a second player back into the mix goes a long way toward restoring the special little something that the Master System release lacked. The NES version also stands out for its more forgiving difficulty curve. The Master System cart does the Master System thing, which is to say that it doesn't really account for the move from arcades to consoles and cheerfully annihilates the player right from the outset. The NES cart starts out almost insultingly easy, with each stage being more difficult to complete than the last. If you can't make it past the first space station in NES Alien Syndrome, even on your own, what are you even doing, man? The second stage replaces the first level's idiot bumblers with wandering xenomorphs straight from Alien, though they're not much more dangerous than the monsters they replace. The third stage gives you blobs that fire more and faster moving projectiles. And by the time you reach stage 4, the alien marauders move quickly and aggressively and pose a Master System-sized threat. The space stations similarly grow in complexity, with the third stage representing a tipping point, where the layout of the level poses as much of a threat as the aliens themselves. You need to complete each level by finding 12 hostages and reaching the exit in just a few minutes' time, but once the stages begin to break up their layouts into blocks of solid ground connected by winding footpaths over deadly chasms of empty space, tracking down all of the humans to be rescued can take some doing. You can refer to the map stations sprinkled around each stage for guidance, but their scale leaves some of the particulars of navigating the environment ambiguous. And while each stage contains a warp panel to zap you to the opposite end of the area, these are only really useful if you know where you'll land and can plan your hostage-saving excursions around those details. In other words, Alien Syndrome on NES does a pretty good job of threading the needle required by every arcade-to-console conversion. It gives you a bit of leeway at the outset to pull you into the action while allowing you to get a handle on the mechanics. But the difficulty level becomes sufficient that you can't just breeze through the action from start to finish on your first go. You need to learn the stage layouts, plan routes around the locations of your objectives and weapon pickups, and of course figure out the best tactics for dealing with the bosses at the end of each mission. One nice touch is that Alien Syndrome allows you to retain your current weapon pickup when you die, so you don't have to worry about reverting to the awful default gun if you get wrecked by a boss. You'll still have that flamethrower once you respawn. The weapons could have used another pass for balancing, admittedly. By far the best weapon is the laser, which has a piercing effect that allows it to clip through a target and take out an entire line of enemies. The flamethrower seems like it should be awesome, since you can hold down the attack button to unleash a stream of flame for several uninterrupted seconds, but for some reason, the flame gutters out once it hits an enemy, reducing it to a single-fire weapon with a paltry attack range. The game kindly provides 2 of each weapon icon in each stage, meaning that both players can find complementary weapons or use the same kind of gun, provided the other player shares the second icon with you. Of course, there's still no law requiring co-op partners not to be dicks. Maybe someday, once I'm king. The strange thing about these 2 very different versions of Alien Syndrome is that both conversions were handled by the same studio, Sanritsu, the Wanted folks. I do not have a good explanation for why their efforts on NES and Master System turned out so differently. It's just one of those things. Maybe the rebalanced NES version and the reintegration of cooperative play was an attempt to apologize for kind of bumbling the Master System port, while still retaining some value for the Master System conversion by making the NES release look hideous. Who can say, really? In Japan, Sunsoft published Alien Syndrome as an official, licensed Famicom game. I mean, the Famicom licensing system worked differently there than in the US, with a less formal structure, but still, you could find this game at a normal retail store, theoretically alongside the Mark III cartridge. Not so in the US, though. Few retailers dared to carry Tengen carts, making this more of a rental game, or something you'd find at a small local shop. Not that it would have competed head-to-head at standard retail with the Master System release. By the end of 1989, Master System had become an increasingly scarce sight in stores, so both of these cartridges were something you probably needed to make an active effort to find if you lived in the US and loved the idea of playing Alien Syndrome at home, even a compromised version. Now, it wasn't all Sega all the time for Tengen at the end of 1989. They continued doing that thing where they published NES ports of Atari Games coin-op titles despite being a division of Atari Corp and therefore technically unrelated to Atari Games. This did nothing to resolve the confusion caused by the Atari schism, of course, but it did result in some pretty good pulls of lesser-known arcade titles to NES, assuming you could find them at retail, of course. Like Super Sprint, Vindicators plays better than it looks. It is a shame about the looks, though. The original Vindicators machine ran on Gauntlet hardware and adopted a forced isometric-like perspective with nicely shaded sprites rendered in the strong yet subtle color palettes that seem to define late 80s Atari Games creations. It's a simple game, but it looked nice in arcades. On NES, it's a simple game that looks, well, simple. The meager sprites and barren backdrops do nothing to sell casual observers on the appeal of the game. And frankly, if it weren't for the name on the box and the title screen, you might struggle to identify this as a conversion of Vindicators in the first place. The real telltale sign? Vindicators brings the classic Atari difficulty scaling setup over to the NES for, I believe, the first time. You can begin a new session of Vindicators at one of 3 difficulty levels. Rather than simply being easy, normal, hard, your difficulty selection instead consists of beginning at a different stage of play. You can start with the first level, which allows you to coast through brain-dead enemies but awards you no bonus points. Or you can launch into zones 2 or 3, where you'll face more aggressive and numerous enemies, but also receive a hefty supply of bonus points for your troubles. In this case, bonus points amount to stars, a sort of in-game currency that you can use to boost your battle tank's capabilities. At the end of each stage, you can cash in the stars that you earn from defeated enemies to increase stats like movement speed, attack power, defensive strength, and so forth. So beginning from the lowest difficulty level means that you need to earn those boosts from 0, whereas you can get a jump on performance boosts in the more advanced difficulty settings. It's a pretty strong and fair system that prevents the game from always playing the same, while also giving you enough enhancements to allow your tank to survive the more dangerous battlefields should you start midstream. But then, Vindicators is remarkably fair to begin with, despite originating as a mod for Gauntlet, a game that again was infamous for its ruthless thirst for quarters. When you die in Vindicators, you have to restart the current level, but you're also given a bonus allocation of stars to invest in tank upgrades in order to give you more of a fighting chance. Now, you can't just exploit this feature in order to cheese your way to the end in a maxed out vehicle. You only have 3 lives after all, but it certainly feels refreshingly kind and pro-player in a way that stands in sharp contrast to, say, Afterburner. It's a pretty good game, though I wouldn't exactly call it revolutionary. Despite some pleasant design choices, Vindicators doesn't move the state of NES game design forward in any way, and in fact calls to mind several previous NES releases. It plays really like Iron Tank, as an arena-type maze action game. Oh, and the end of each stage might remind you a little bit of Section Z, in that you can choose from one of two exits. Unlike in Section Z, these exits don't send you through a maze-like network of stages that forces you to memorize routes in order to advance. Rather, the doors simply signal the fact that Atari designed Vindicators around two-player cooperative action. Each player needs to find their own key when you play co-op, which offers a new variant on the time-honored tradition of fighting for resources. You thought your big brother was a bastard for always stealing both laser icons in each stage of Alien Syndrome, but just wait until he starts stealing the easy key in Vindicators and leaving you to die. In the early going, you'll find keys just laying around in the open, but after you completed a few levels, they become far trickier to track down. Eventually, you'll reach a point where, for example, the keys are both held by enemies who actually start behind your spawn point in the level, meaning that if you ignore those dangerous opponents behind you and just scoot ahead to safety, you'll end up having to backtrack to liberate their keys. Vindicators mixes things up too, such as the inclusion of high-risk, high-reward bonus rooms at the end of certain levels, where you can collect a bunch of bonuses but only have a few seconds to reach the exit before the room explodes. And every once in a while you'll face a boss, which is where you'll really wish you had a second player on hand to help draw fire. With its linear combat, cooperative shooting, and streamlined power-up mechanics, Vindicators sits somewhere between past games like Ikari Warriors and future arcade hits like Smash TV in terms of design and vibe. It loses a lot of its visual appeal in the move to NES, but like Super Sprint, that doesn't hinder its playability. It's another strong Atari Games conversion to NES courtesy of Tengen, and, unlike Tetris, one that wouldn't destroy the company with legal ramifications. Next time on NES Works, welcome to the what now?